revealed himself to his people. Today, folks, including Richard Dawkins, ask, why doesn't God just reveal himself again and end the argument about his existence once and for all? Do you think there's any chance he might?
There is a chance he might. I've asked this question often. What is it Woody Allen has said in one of his movies? If just God would sneeze, I would be happy. All I just want is to sneeze, and that would be sufficient. My belief is that if God did some spectacular miracle, the heavens lit up all over the world, and in hundreds of languages, clouds formed the words, "I am God, you better take care of each other," it would have an impact for approximately 3 days. For some people, forever. But immediately there would be explanations of cloud formations that scientists would come up with. It wouldn't matter. That's the brilliance of the story, to my mind, at any rate, in the Bible, and where the Jews are shown all these miracles and then end up building a golden calf anyway. I mean, shortly after, the sea was split, and they still built a golden calf. That is human nature, because we always ask, what did you do for me today? That's the way it is. We are children in many ways, and God is this paternalistic figure. And just as our children don't walk around thinking, my God, you diapered me all those years? Wow. I mean, how many babies say, I've prevented my parents from having intimacy for the last 3 months. I'm going to shut up tonight. It just doesn't happen. The human is not built in with gratitude. And so the same thing with God. It's, what did you do for me lately? So I don't think it would work if God did make some revelation. And finally, I don't think there's anything for God to reveal. There's nothing new to be said. It's been said. There's nothing new to be said. It is our task. There is an instruction manual that I believe in, and if you follow it, generally speaking, people are kinder. And if you don't follow it, or you pervert it, then obviously bad happens. But I don't know, what is God going to add today? What exactly? Don't abuse children? Don't build gas chambers? What hasn't been said? It's been said. It's our task to say either I will live by it or not. But that's my answer to that question.
Actually, there is nothing against child abuse or genocide in the Ten Commandments, since you happen to mention this.
Well, there is. There's do not murder. There is. Murder means the immoral killing of an innocent. So there is, in fact, a prescription.
There's nothing for child abuse and nothing against genocide.
Well,
genocide is about to be recommended against the Amalekites only a few pages later.
Yes, against the Amalekites, it is one exception because of a horrific evil. It never happened, but that it is prescribed. I have no answer to it, just as I cannot tell you that if God, people say, well, what if God told you to sacrifice your child, like he told Abraham?
And no condemnation of slavery or child abuse.
Okay. God, well,
but of coveting, yes. Of envy, yes.
Well,
of ambition, yes.
Okay.
This is obviously man-made, and man-made at a time of Stone Age morality. Okay. There's no divine presence or inspiration in it at all. Surely that must be plain.
Oh, well, that is a matter of opinion. My opinion is that the break with everything preceding the Old Testament, specifically the first 5 books, is so enormous that you have to either explain its authors as supermen or some divine authorship involved. The notion that there is an invisible God who prefers goodness to evil was unknown in the world. The idea that this life is to be celebrated. Remember, Judaism arose out of Egypt. In Egypt, the Book of the Dead was the Bible. The pyramids were the great works of art, and they were tombs. The Egyptians celebrated death. And it was that Torah coming out of Egypt that said, I have put before you life and death, and you shall choose life. It is an utterly life-centered idea in the midst of a death-centered world. Ironically, Israel is, to this day, 2008, still in a death-centered world.
Question from Mr. Hitchens. You state that you don't want God, or God as you define him, to exist. But what if it turned out that this God, unlike many of his flawed followers, were full of mercy and love towards those who suffer? The God of the prodigal son, be it the parable, the painting, or the book. Would that be a God you could accept?
No, because let me say what I think about the underlay of that question, which is people try to design the sort of God they would like. This is a part of the religious cafeteria of which I'm so critical. The God, if he exists, does not owe me an explanation. It would be idle, it seems to me, and trivial to say, well, if you exist, why are you cruel? It's boring and self-pitying to talk like that. Pascal says, in his famous wager, well, what have you got to lose? If he does exist, you may find yourself tremendously fortunate if you make the right propitiations and if you agree with his existence. And if he doesn't, well, then you haven't lost a thing. Now, I regard that as another example of the essential immorality of religious preachment. That seems to me a hucksterish thing to be saying on Pascal's part. My reply to it would be, Bertrand Russell's reply to this, by the way, was if he was confronted with God on the day he died, what would he say? He said, "Oh Lord, you did not give us enough evidence." A bit dry. I think I would say, if I had my chance at Pascal's bat, I would say, well, if your reputation, sir, because it appears to be, sir, or Lord, is as I understand it to be, it might be that you would look more kindly upon someone who would not pretend to believe you in the hope of a reward or the fear of a punishment. Someone who would rather try and lead an ethical life without that bribe, without that inducement. And that I might in that way perhaps earn the credit of this very dubious character. But you see, even to talk like this is surely to make ourselves realize that no grown-up can really allow themselves to think this way. We are responsible ourselves for how we treat others. We are responsible ourselves for human solidarity, and we will suffer when those solidarities break down. And we have a great interest as well as a great need to keep human dignity and decency alive for its own sake. Not because we fear heaven, not because we fear hell or wish for heaven or desire any of these other sorts of primitive fear or inducement.
May I have a brief response? God is in the Abrahamic tradition, and in fact, I think for all the major religions, an immaterial being. And there is something inherently ridiculous in demanding a material proof of an immaterial being. You have to ask, what is the kind of evidence that would convince me? So, for example, gravity is immaterial. Now, not the effects of gravity. If I jump out of a tall tower, I plummet to the ground. But that's me. Gravity is the law describing what I did. Where do we find gravity? We infer it from its effects. So the question is, we have here a universe. It had a beginning, presumably didn't create itself. Who created it? Or what created it? That what can't be natural. The universe includes everything all of nature. It has to be non-natural, let us say supernatural. It has to be pretty powerful, maybe not all powerful, but close to it. That we call God. Now, in one of my debates with the atheist Michael Shermer, I told him, I said, what kind of proof would convince you that God exists? What if you found a planet that had emblazoned on it, Yahweh made this? Would you convert on the spot? And he said no. He said, I can think of no evidence whatever that would convince me. In a sense, I guess what we're getting at here is, there is here, I think, not only, and I think on the part of Russell too, a refusal to believe, but an atheism that has explanations other than simply the absence of evidence. In some senses, Christopher got close to it earlier in this debate where he said, to me, God is a bit like a celestial despot. Heaven is sort of like celestial North Korea. I don't want to stand there handing out garlands for eternity. I don't want to go to that kind of place. So it's not as if God is grabbing the unbeliever and flinging him into hell. God is making heaven available to everyone, and the atheist of his free will is saying, I don't want to go there.